There are times in life when you feel unlike those around you. Something deep within quietly tells you that you see the world differently. It's hard to explain, and maybe you never truly have. It wasn't a decision you made, it's simply who you are. You view life through a distinct lens, one that finds meaning in silence and depth in the seemingly ordinary. While others may pass over subtle details, you experience them with intensity. Silence for you carries more weight than noise. You notice when someone's in pain, even when they mask it with a smile. You feel the emotions of others as if they were your own, even when no words are spoken. You never asked to be this way. You've just always been like this. Carl Jung once said that exceptional souls aren't formed in ease, but are shaped in the quiet fire of reflection. Maybe that's why, even in childhood, you often felt out of place, as if your soul belonged to another era or world entirely. While others were drawn to noise and distraction, you turned inward. As the world fixated on the external, you explored your inner universe. That path came at a price, a deep, lingering loneliness, not because you lacked company, but because you felt no one truly understood how you experienced life. But that sensitivity, that emotional depth, that unique connection to existence, it isn't a flaw. It's not something to hide or suppress. It's a message, a reminder that something rare resides within you, a soul, not just any soul, but one that perceives more, that understands without explanation. A soul that picks up on what others overlook, that feels what most try to ignore. You hold within you an ancient wisdom. You might not yet know how to express it, but it's there, quietly burning. If you've ever felt too much, too emotional, too thoughtful, too intense, it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because the world hasn't yet learned how to embrace the depth you carry. Know this clearly. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are awake, awake in a world still asleep. And when one soul awakens, it begins to shift everything around it, even if the process is slow. Having a sensitive soul means you experience life more deeply, not because you're weak, but because your awareness allows you to see beneath the surface. You don't just hear people, you feel them, their grief, their longing, it moves through you. The pain others carry becomes something you bear in silence, something they can't always name, but you sense instinctively. The world may have labeled you too much. It may have told you to toughen up, stop overthinking, or push away your emotions. But what it often fails to see is that this is simply how you are, and more importantly, how you're meant to be. Your depth isn't a burden, it's a hidden strength. Jung believed that to discover one's light, one must face their shadow, and you, with all your inner complexity, have faced storms most people can't even imagine. You've sat quietly with difficult questions. You've felt the ache of emptiness. You've asked yourself time and again, what's the point of all this? And yet you're still here, still searching, still listening. That voice inside you, that's your soul speaking. Not everyone hears theirs. Many silence it with noise, distractions, or denial, but not you. You've learned to sit with your pain. You've learned that healing doesn't come from ignoring wounds, but from honoring them. Pain doesn't take you away from yourself. It leads you back to who you truly are. Your soul is special because it chose to feel. It chose awareness over numbness. And yes, that awareness can hurt. It can be isolating, but it's also sacred. In a world desperate to escape truth, you chose to go deeper. While others look outward for meaning, you turned inward and asked the questions only the soul dares to ask. Who am I? What am I meant to offer? What does it mean to live authentically? You may not have all the answers yet, but asking these questions already sets you apart. You're not lost. You're simply returning to your truth. A soul isn't defined by its achievements, but by how it transforms. Each time you chose compassion over bitterness, each time you allowed yourself to feel when others told you to be stoic, each time you opened your heart despite the risk, you stepped into your strength. Your soul doesn't seek applause or validation. It exists on a different wavelength, and while that can sometimes make you feel alone, it isn't wrong. In fact, it's what the world needs now more than ever. Even if you've often felt like an outsider, the reality is you're finally learning how to belong to yourself. You weren't meant to blend in. You were meant to awaken, to evolve, to help others reconnect with the parts of themselves they've neglected. Jung once said that a life not lived is a disease. And even if you've hidden yourself at times, know that there's still life in you, still fire, still light that refuses to go out. Your soul is unique, not just because it feels different, but because it carries purpose. A calling that often lives beyond words and logic, beyond what's visible, and that purpose doesn't always look grand or dramatic. Sometimes it's as subtle as choosing kindness over anger, as simple as telling the truth when silence would be easier. As rare as truly seeing someone when others look away, it's in the smallest gestures, in how you sit with someone in silence, in how you listen without judgment, in how you create space for people who've forgotten how to hold space for themselves. That, your real essence shines through. Perhaps no one has acknowledged this in you. Maybe you've never been thanked or celebrated. But your soul doesn't require applause. It doesn't need approval. It only seeks authenticity. Because when your soul is different, you can't follow paths that others walk. You grow tired of surface-level chatter, of trying to conform to expectations that don't fit you. You're not drawn to shallow praise or hollow gestures. Something within you has always searched for meaning, something genuine, something deeply your own, and that search hasn't been easy, because the more aware you become, the more you notice how disconnected the world truly is. You begin to see the contradictions hidden in everyday life, pain disguised as achievement, fear masked as ambition, emptiness accepted as normal. But you can't pretend. You've tried. You've tried to conform, to meet expectations, to silence your discomfort. Yet something inside always whispered, "This isn't your place." That feeling wasn't weakness, it was intuition. It was your soul guiding you back to who you are, to the part of you that never gave up, never went completely dark. And there, in the discomfort, in the uncertainty, in the sense of not belonging, your real transformation began. Because special souls aren't revealed during peaceful times. They are shaped in confusion, in struggle, in the deep pull to look within. When you began that inner journey, things changed. You stopped searching outward for clarity. You stopped needing others to confirm your truth. You became your own refuge, your own compass, your own steady light. And in that space you discovered something powerful. What once hurt now opens you. What once isolated you now connects you. What once confused you now reveals wisdom. Because a soul that's learned to be with itself is no longer afraid of its own light. And that's when everything begins to change. It no longer hurts to be different. You start to embrace it. You understand now that you weren't meant to fit in. You were meant to grow beyond limits. You weren't born to follow someone else's path, but to create your own. To walk where no one had walked before. You no longer need everyone to understand you. Instead, you start attracting those who recognize you, not just with their eyes, but with their spirit. Because real connection isn't about appearance. It's about resonance. And when your energy rises, everything around you starts to shift. That's one of the quiet powers of a unique soul. It inspires others just by being. You don't need grand gestures to make an impact. Sometimes, the way you listen, the way you simply show up, brings light to places that once only knew shadow. Not everyone can do that. To reach that space, you had to fall apart. You had to break. You had to ask yourself the questions others avoid. And you didn't stay in your pain. You went through it. You transformed it into understanding, into empathy, into a kind of strength that doesn't shout but simply stands. Those who've consciously faced their own darkness walk differently. They walk humbly, with no need to prove or impose, because they know who they are, and even in silence, that truth is felt. Your soul is different because it doesn't settle for just getting by. It wants to live fully, deeply, with honesty and meaning. That's why the things that once seemed fine now feel too heavy. Empty talk, forced connections, goals that aren't yours. They no longer fit, not because you're above them, but because you've learned to value your energy. When you allow yourself to be genuine without masks, life responds differently. You stop chasing. You stop trying to convince anyone of your worth. You start attracting what naturally resonates with you. And you release, without fear, what you once clung to, because now you understand. What's real isn't forced, and what's meant for you won't pass you by. At this point, you're no longer seeking a place to belong. You're seeking what's real, truth, presence, peace, and in that search, something quiet yet profound stirs within. You make peace with your past, not by pretending it didn't hurt, but by seeing it clearly, by honoring it as the ground that prepared you for this awakening. You forgive, not to forget, but because you've come to understand. Through compassion, you find gratitude, not just for what was good, but for what made you resilient, wise, and deeply human. Your soul is extraordinary because it chose awareness in a world that often avoids it. It didn't settle for the surface, but was drawn instinctively to what's real. Yes, that may have made you feel alone. But solitude wasn't punishment. It was preparation, a quiet space so you could finally hear what only you were meant to. Hear your own voice. Now you know your emotions weren't too much, they were sensitivity. Your depth wasn't a flaw, it was guidance. The way you love, fully and differently, isn't a weakness. It's exactly the kind of love the world needs. So don't change. Don't shrink yourself. Don't hide. The world already has too many copies. But your soul, it's one of a kind. When the soul truly awakens, it doesn't arrive with fireworks. It's not a dramatic flash of insight. It's subtle, quiet on the outside, but fierce within. Like scattered pieces slowly finding their way back to each other, as if something long awaited is finally coming together, and from that place, everything changes. You can't live as you did before. Surface-level talk no longer satisfies. You can't stay in jobs that numb you. You can't maintain relationships that exist out of habit. Your soul becomes more selective, not from ego, but from the need to protect its vitality. You start to see that you're not here to be drained. You're here to express, to grow, to live fully. Often, the most remarkable souls are those who've endured the deepest trials. Not because they deserved pain, but because they had to move through it to remember their essence. Some truths only appear in the dark. Some understanding only comes when your familiar world falls apart. Because it's in that collapse, when nothing remains, that you finally discover you were what you were seeking all along. What you craved was always within you, patiently waiting to be noticed. You begin to see the world differently. What once felt like chaos now feels purposeful. What felt like loss now feels like release. You begin to trust the unfolding of life, even when you don't fully understand it. You stop running after things that leave. You stop asking for what doesn't come naturally. Instead, a quiet knowing begins to guide your steps. Even without certainty, your soul knows, and that's enough. Modern life often demands logic, productivity, predictability, but your soul isn't linear. It flows in rhythms, it moves in patterns, it speaks through intuition. And when you stop resisting that nature, clarity comes, not ease, but truth. Over time, you realize that true fulfillment doesn't come from meeting external standards. It comes from being radically honest with yourself, listening to what your inner voice whispers in the quiet moments. And even though others can't hear that whisper, it transforms everything. It changes how you walk through life, how you choose, how you love. Your soul wasn't made to be understood by everyone. It came to show you that you don't need external approval to be your full self. The most powerful transformation of having a special soul isn't what shows on the outside, but what unfolds within. At some point, you realize real growth isn't about titles or status. It's about how you treat yourself in solitude. It's in how you speak to yourself when no one else is around. How you support yourself when there's no one to lean on. How you remain true to yourself even if it means letting others down. That inner loyalty takes time. It's forged through mistakes. Through all the times you abandoned your truth to fit in, to be accepted, to hold on to something you thought you needed. But a soul like yours can't stray from itself forever. It might try, it might get lost, but eventually the moment comes, the one where you can't lie to yourself anymore, and everything begins to shift. You stop chasing what once consumed you. You realize many of your goals weren't yours. Many accomplishments were masks. Many relationships were shelters that kept you from yourself. And yes, it's painful at first. The identity you built begins to crumble. You feel lost. But within that quiet collapse, something small and certain lights up. A spark that's hard to describe, but impossible to ignore. It's your soul remembering. From that point on, you rebuild. Not to impress, not to please, but to simply be. Fully, honestly. Shadows and light, contradictions and clarity. As you walk this path of returning to yourself, something fundamental shifts in your connection to the world. You no longer crave validation. You're grounded in the peace of knowing yourself. From there, life becomes more intentional. You become mindful of your words, your consumption, your relationships. You learn to protect your energy, not to exclude others, but out of love for yourself. You no longer fear being alone. Solitude becomes sacred. It's where your soul strengthens, where creativity flows, where intuition sharpens. In stillness, everything changes. You don't panic at emptiness anymore. You don't accept half-hearted love. You stop chasing affirmation, and from that rooted place, you start building a life that's truly your own. Your choices are no longer shaped by pressure, but by a quiet, unwavering inner compass. You feel what aligns, not always with reason, but with your body, your energy, your spirit. And while that may make you misunderstood, it also makes you free. Free from conditioning, free from expectation, free to live with honesty. And in that freedom, life begins to align. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Not because you have to, but because you no longer need to. You've come to understand that even chaos carries beauty, that loss often hides unseen gifts, and that every experience, even the painful ones, teaches you something vital, bringing you back to your center. As you continue along this journey of reconnection, your priorities begin to shift, gently, naturally. Your life is no longer shaped by external expectations, but by what your soul is now fully ready to express. What once felt urgent now fades into the background. The things that used to keep you up at night barely register anymore. It's not that you've become indifferent. It's that you've realized much of your stress came from trying to control what was never meant to be under your control. Now, from a place of greater clarity, you begin to let go. The need to fix everything, to have all the answers, to carry weight that was never really yours. In its place, a new lightness emerges, not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because you're no longer trying to hold everything together out of fear or a need to please. You begin to trust the timing of things. You learn that what's meant for you arrives naturally and leaves when its time is done. You stop resisting change. You stop needing validation. You stop explaining what doesn't need to be explained. Because now you understand what's truly yours, your peace, your path, your truth, doesn't have to be earned through struggle. And in this shift, time itself begins to feel different. You're no longer in a hurry. You're no longer chasing a version of success that was never truly yours. You find meaning in stillness, in quiet, in the moments between. What once felt dull becomes comforting. What you used to seek in others, recognition, love, purpose, now begins to rise from within, because the more you offer to yourself, the less you depend on a world that was never built to meet your deeper needs. Over time, this inner connection deepens. It reflects in how you move, how you speak, how you truly listen. You no longer need to have it all figured out. Just being present is enough. Just seeing others as they are, without filters, without judgment, becomes more powerful than any performance. Your authenticity becomes your language. And without trying, you begin to shift the energy of the spaces you enter. You notice your presence affects others. Even your silence speaks volumes. Your ability to see others clearly, without labels, gives them room to exhale. It's not because you see yourself as above anyone. It's because you've lived through darkness. You didn't escape it. You didn't shut down. You stayed present long enough to understand it, learn from it, and return with insight. That's one of the deepest offerings a grounded soul can give. The ability to emerge from hardship with clarity. Not everyone does. Many avoid, distract, deny, but you chose to walk through it, and because of that you can now stand beside others, not to change them, but to witness them, not to be right, but to understand, not to possess, but to love. You guide not by force, but by example. Because you've learned to do these things for yourself, you now have something meaningful to share. You're no longer driven to fix others or prove yourself. You move in alignment with what feels true. And that's enough. Those who resonate will meet you there. Those who don't will continue on their own path, and you're at peace with either outcome. Your goal is no longer to fit in, but to live in integrity. You begin to see that your sensitivity was never a flaw. It was a misread strength. That your longing for depth wasn't a weakness. It was your soul seeking something more meaningful. That your discomfort with surface-level living wasn't pride. It was your inner wisdom telling you there's more. And yes, not everyone will understand. Some will say you're too intense. Others may think you're imagining things. But you no longer feel the need to justify who you are. You've made peace with being different. And instead of hiding it, you honor it. Because within that difference lies your essence, your truth, your strength. And if something in this message resonates with you, if it feels like you're hearing something your soul already knew, then perhaps the time has come, the time to stop hiding, the time to recognize that your sensitivity is a strength, the time to see your uniqueness not as a problem, but as a gift. The world doesn't need more masks. It needs awakened souls like yours. So if this message has reached you, if it has reminded you of something you almost forgot, then we invite you to keep walking this path with us. Subscribe to the channel and join us as we continue exploring these quiet, powerful spaces where the mind, soul, and consciousness meet.